Hello, everyone. We're doing the series called Courageous Dreaming, How Shamans Dream the World into Being. And this is chapter 1 called Escaping the Nightmare. A quote to start. By Garrison Keillor. I believe in looking reality straight in the eye and denying it. When I was 15, I was deeply infatuated with a girl who was on the local swim team with me. Rose was the most beautiful young woman I'd ever met, and my heart ached whenever I was in the water with her. I was far too timid and shy to tell her how I felt, even though I often swam next to her and experienced sheer pleasure each time a small ripple washed over me from her lane. As we did our laps side by side, separated only by the floating lane marker, my imagination took flight. I saw us declaring our undying love for each other, and I envisioned her tears of joy as I dropped to my knee and asked her to marry me. I imagined her smile as I came home from work to our little cottage on a hillside, our laughing children running toward me with open arms. I was completely caught up in this dream, which never came true for Rose and me. A far more confident boy on our team wooed her, and they ultimately wed. I kept the secret of my infatuation hidden inside me as Rose and I went off in different directions. Eventually, I married another woman, assuming that my life would unfold according to the fantasy that had played in my head like a movie, with this woman taking over Rose's role of adoring wife and mother. To my great shock, I discovered that my dream marriage soon became a nightmare. My wife wasn't happy raising our children while I worked, and my job at that time was unfulfilling and draining. The little cottage on the hillside ended up being a run-down townhouse in a noisy and dangerous neighborhood on the wrong side of San Francisco. I felt powerless and trapped. The more I tried to make my life work according to what I previously envisioned, the more I suffered. After many years and the failure of that marriage, I realized that I'd been living a nightmare fabricated by my culture, community, and family. I'd never questioned its value or imagined that I might create something different for myself. Many people today are in a similar situation, although they might not know it. You may even be one of them, pulled along into a linear progression from school to marriage, career, parenthood, and middle age, without questioning whether this path is the right one for you and what your purpose is. In a corner of your consciousness, a faint voice whispers, "There must be more to life than this," but you're afraid to acknowledge its message. Lacking the courage to admit that you're a co-conspirator in a nightmare that isn't making you feel empowered or happy, you simply choose to avoid thinking about the discomfort. You continue plodding forward, one foot in front of the other. To quench our thirst for meaning and help us escape from the nightmare, we often seek power, fame, and influence, authority, or money, hoping that if we have enough of these things, then perhaps the dream might work for us. We may reach for a quick fix, acting impulsively or repressing our difficult feelings with a bottle of wine, an extramarital affair, or a flurry of activity that keeps us so busy we simply don't have time to think, feel, or dream. We don't realize that we have the power to wake up from the nightmare and open our eyes to a new day, and that we can do so without changing the spouse, the job, or the children. Overcoming apathy. We could end the nightmare at any time because we have all the recipes for success and happiness we need. Unfortunately, we rarely use them. This reminds me of the recent visit I paid to a friend of mine who's trapped in a desperate marriage and by a schedule that's killing him. He's 40 pounds overweight and realizes that he needs to exercise more and meditate, but has no time for either. His diet is terrible, although he knows that he really should be eating better. The irony of it all is that my friend's bookshelves are lined with self-help volumes, many of which he's authored. As we sipped a glass of wine, he began to tell me of his woes. "Why don't you take some of your own advice?" I replied. "I don't have the time or the money," he confessed. This man had fallen into apathy. His belief in his powerlessness was keeping him stuck, unable to change anything in his life. Apathy manifests as depression and learned helplessness. The belief that all of one's past experiences are evident of the utter futility of trying to affect one's life. People who suffer from learned helplessness think they have no control over their situations. So even if their suffering is great, they won't take the smallest action to change matters because they figure, what's the point? My friend cared enough about his life to take a hard look at it and admit that it wasn't working, but for all the solutions he was aware of, he couldn't muster the effort to implement them. He simply didn't have the courage to act. I shared with him what the old shaman had said to me in the jungle, that we can either have what we want or the reasons why we can't. My fellow author kept choosing the reasons why he can't. I don't have the time or the money. When we throw cold water on every opportunity life offers us for fixing a situation, we exhaust ourselves and everyone around us. When we're apathetic, we have an endless string of excuses for why we can't act. The people who love and want to support us burn out and avoid us because they can't stand hearing yet another reason for why we have no power to change our lives. Apathy is the opposite of courage. It makes us so cowardly that we float through our lives like ghosts, disconnected from any sort of purpose or passion. We fret about all that's wrong in the world and in our lives, but we can't recognize that we could make a difference. We don't find the courage to change, and we don't bother looking for it either. When we live without courage, we create a nightmare for ourselves, but we may not realize it as such. We may not be steeped in anger, frozen in fear, or depressed. In fact, we may even feel amused, contented, or happy at times, but inevitably, we experience moments when we are aware of how limiting and oppressive our situation is. As if caught in a fog, we feel utterly powerless. It seems that we can't run fast enough, that if we call for help, our tongues won't work, or no one will listen, or that people who come to our aid are doing so for their own agendas, trampling over our boundaries and barging into our intimate space. Giving in to apathy, we block ourselves from imagining what our lives could be. Instead, we dwell on how we don't have enough time or money, or how we're too fat or skinny to change anything, or we start to fantasize about someone or something rescuing us from our sadness and powerlessness. At the moment of lucidity in a bad dream, when you recognize that you're in a terrifying situation, you abruptly find yourself with your eyes open, waiting for the fear and powerlessness to dissipate as you reassure yourself that you're safe now, that you're back in reality. But what happens if your nightmare is unfolding in your waking life? That moment of lucidity doesn't come to lift you out of the scene of your partner saying, "I don't love you anymore," or the doctor telling you, "I'm sorry, it's cancer." Your suffering feels completely real, and you don't see any way to transport yourself into a better reality. Just like when you're asleep, the moment you're conscious of your waking nightmare is the moment you have the responsibility of changing it. However, it's important to recognize that willpower and unflagging belief aren't enough to alter the facts of your material circumstances in any significant way. If it were that easy, you could simply build up your determination and intention to will yourself a winning lottery ticket and a perfect bill of health. Fairy tale fantasies also don't work because they involve dreaming from a place of being wounded or unhealed. In the end, the prince never shows up, or he turns back into a frog after the third kiss. But when you dream a new reality for yourself on the inside, events outside of you will begin to align with the change you've made internally. It might happen slowly, but you could also be surprised by how rapidly your circumstances shift. Moreover, by dreaming courageously, that is, living a life that's in sync with your soul's desire for peace, meaning, and happiness, you'll find yourself starting to feel joyous and fulfilled, no matter what is going on around you. You'll stop feeling trapped in that nightmare. Our personal nightmares. All of us are born with two piles of suitcases that we drag around with us, our psychological and genetic baggage. Both of these legacies are responsible for the scripts of our personal nightmares. Psychological issues get woven into the stories we tell about our lives and examine on the therapist couch. Mother was too demanding. Our self-esteem suffered. We never had faith in ourselves, and we were unable to be honest in our relationships or to persevere in our goals. These tales also impact our luminous energy field, or LEF, the light body that encases our physical body, as if it were a second skin. In fact, shamans see this as karmic issues, which they perceive energetically as dark imprints in the LEF, or luminous energy field. Your LEF organizes your body in the same way that the energy fields of a magnet organize iron filings on a piece of glass. However, your LEF also informs your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. These, in turn, choreograph whom you're going to be attracted to, date, and marry. Ultimately, it's the information encoded in your LEF that predisposes you to a particular kind of job and boss, and determines the themes that will surface in your relationship with your partner. The LEF is the instrument through which you dream the world into being. It consists of light and vibration. So whatever you vibrate in your LEF, you create in the world. Your inability to forgive your mother and move on causes a mark in your LEF that remains there after the physical body dies. So it's carried into a next lifetime. This wound will draw you to the parents you'll be born through in order to manifest the family that will allow you the opportunity to heal yourself of your karma. If you don't take advantage of the opportunity and choose instead to stay stuck in the same old belief of mom ruined my life or the stork dropped me off at the wrong home, the wound remains unhealed. You wind up with the reasons why you can't have what you want, and your nightmare continues. Psychologists call this the repetition compulsion. You can decide to take advantage of the opportunity to heal, or you can remain trapped in the same old nightmare. Shamans heal karmic wounds using specialized techniques for working with energy to clear the dark imprints in the LEF, because those contain information that will produce disease. I've come to understand that DNA is the hardware that creates the body by manufacturing proteins, while the LEF is the software that provides the instructions to the system. When we clear the LEF, we're no longer doomed to relive the ailments of our parents or carry the old karmic baggage through lifetime after lifetime. We stop dragging the chains of our stories behind us. A shaman might clear the imprint of karmic wound from the LEF through the illumination process, which I describe in detail in my earlier book, Shaman, Healer, Sage. A wound in our energy body can show up in our physical body as well, at the level of organs and systems. It will even inform our DNA, creating a genetic legacy for our children. We all carry genes that predispose us to a variety of ailments, which will appear in our physical body if we live a lifestyle that's in alignment with our karmic wound. For example, if we carry the code for type 2 diabetes, it will manifest if we continue our family's tradition of rewarding and comforting ourselves with sugary and fatty foods. I know a man who, like his father, drank too much, smoked heavily, and repressed resentment that his great career opportunity had slipped away from him. At age 59, the father had suffered a massive heart attack that killed him. At age 59, the son was diagnosed as having a coronary heart disease, but avoided the heart attack by undergoing quadruple bypass. The heart disease gene had been passed along from father to son, but so had the psychological karmic legacy, the behaviors of drinking, smoking, and emotional repression that were part of the nightmare belief of, I miss my chance. Not all illnesses are the work of karma. Some are certainly caused by environmental toxins that affect us, while others are the result of destructive lifestyle choices and don't have a hereditary element. But whatever our genetic legacy is, we can prevent it from creating illness or other personal nightmares for us. We do so by healing the LEF through the practices of living in truth, cleaning up our river, and being ready to die at an instant, setting the scene for a new and better dream. I will explain these practices in part 2. Our cultural nightmare. In addition to our individual nightmares, we share in the collective one of materialism and conformity. The American dream was once one of opportunity and freedom that was expressed in myriad of ways. The inventors of blues, jazz, and rock and roll didn't have freedom from financial worry, the freedom to choose several colors of iPods, or any of the other so-called freedoms that advertisers promise us. But they did have the freedom to create daring and original music. Unfortunately, that was once a noble aim of achievement through hard work and determination, has deteriorated into a cultural nightmare that produces mediocrity. From babyhood forward, we're spoon-fed a set of expectations that most of us don't bother to question until the day we wake up and realize that our lives aren't working for us. Even with all the social changes we've gone through as a civilization in the last 50 years, we find ourselves easily buying into scripted ideas about how we should live our lives and measure our worth and happiness. When we subscribe to the collective nightmare, we convince ourselves we can avoid suffering by working hard to acquire a slightly better job, a slightly better home and car, a slightly better collection of stuff than the next guy has, and a slightly better looking romantic partner than we feel we deserve. That is, we determine our happiness by how much progress we're making toward the big goal of lasting material fulfillment. If we can move from a rental apartment to a starter home to a big house on a huge lot before we're 35, it's a sign that we're living our lives well. We can feel good about ourselves for having achieved what is, after all, the new American dream. We don't allow ourselves to think about whether the one particular lifestyle we've talked ourselves into is making us happy, or whether something radically different might be more fulfilling for us. If our forward momentum is lost, the spouse leaves, the job becomes hellish, a health crisis takes the attention and money that we'd earmarked for achieving our goal of happiness and wealth, we feel like failures. We measure ourselves by our achievements and productivity by how much we're doing, instead of focusing on our emotional and spiritual growth and enjoying the process of learning, discovering, and maturing. We've been taught that thinking about our problems and examining them from every angle will help us change our habits and create more fulfilling lives. But we can get just as stuck in the nightmare by thinking too much as we do by doing too much. 100 years after Sigmund Freud introduced the world of psychoanalysis, we've built a common vocabulary to help us understand and talk about every one of our concerns, big or small. While it's great that we're more self-aware than we used to be, the so-called talking cure hasn't exactly cured us of our fear, nor has it shown us how to live a life of courage. The problem is that we are focused on problems. All of our energy goes into thinking about, worrying about, and trying to fix our concerns. What we should be doing is shifting our perception to a higher level so that we can tap into our courage and imagine a world that isn't beleaguered with issues and actually dream it into being. When we operate from a higher level of consciousness, we stop perceiving problems and instead perceive situations that are neither good nor bad. They simply are. When we do so, we start to see that an opportunity lies in every situation if we simply look at it from a different level of awareness. Remaining stuck in our minds, what I call the level of jaguar, keeps us focused on trying to overcome our obstacles by creating security for ourselves in the material world. We think that financial success will protect us from harm, from being without food and shelter, and from having to depend on others for our everyday needs. Unfortunately, these dreams are unsustainable. Even if we built up a nest egg so big that it couldn't be spent in a lifetime, it wouldn't protect us from becoming terminally ill or losing a loved one in an accident. In addition, if everyone were to achieve the level of material wealth that we think we should aspire to, the impact on the global environment would be devastating. Imagine everyone in India and China living with the largesse that those of us in the United States do. The American dream of material excess isn't realistic in the long run, and it's not making Americans happy anyway. We also look to social success as a form of security, so we long to be loved and admired. In fact, many people today dream of being famous because they mistakenly believe that that's the ticket to lasting love and admiration. However, the cost of others' approval can be intolerably high. There is no security in the material world, no matter how much we'd like to believe that the opposite is true. With courage of the soul, we don't define ourselves as big houses, nice cards, worldwide fame, or social position, yet we can still enjoy all of these. We consider the lilies of the valley, the lilies of the field, and how they neither toil nor spin, yet they thrive in beauty and abundance. Yes, we address our needs and attain some comfort in the material world, but mostly we're concerned with our soul's longing to make the most of our gifts and talents and participate in creating a better world. We dream the world we'd like to live in. Our dreams stop being goals we strive for and start becoming a way of life. They cease being rooted in fears of lack and scarcity and are instead rooted in love and abundance. And while the dreams of the soul serve our own needs as individuals, they also serve those of the world. These are sacred dreams, fresh, creative, and able to infuse us with passion and the courage to act. Uncreative dreams. Unlike sacred dreams, the goals we set for ourselves don't tend to be very creative. Hard as we try to figure out how to manifest happiness in our lives, we don't often have the courage or creativity to conceive of a radically different way of living. Rather than question the expectations we've been carrying with us since childhood, most of us simply go along with the nightmare of mediocrity. That is, a culture of conformity, shaped by the media, which pretends to celebrate difference, diversity, and creativity, but actually promotes belonging and security to an extreme. We become afraid to break out of the mold and do anything truly different. That's not to say we don't want to think of ourselves as a cut above the rest. Author and radio personality Garrison Keillor poked fun at this fantasy about ourselves in his description of the utopian Lake Wobegon, a fictional small town in Minnesota where all the children are above average. Of course, it's impossible for everyone to be above average. We can't change the laws of statistics and bell curves. The bulge is in the middle, where most of us reside, not at the high end of intelligence or achievement. We could try to move the entire bell curve to the right so that everyone is a little more intelligent, creative, or productive, or has a little more of whatever quality we admire. But that wouldn't satisfy our need to feel special. We want to believe that me and mine are just lucky enough to be on the right side of that curve, in the above average category for everything. This is the mentality that has led to the dumbing down of scholastic aptitude tests several times over the last few decades. Our college-bound teenagers seem to be doing better than ever before because their test scores are quite impressive, while professors aren't fooled one bit. We as a culture enjoy the false assurance that our kids are getting smarter. Whenever doubt about our specialness, our above-average place on that bell curve arises, we become vulnerable to the pervasive message of advertising that we can regain our status by using our spending power. If we feel that we're becoming indistinguishable from the fellow next door, we're told that an easy solution can be found in obtaining a mass-marketed object that will capture our uniqueness and personal style. We pull out our credit cards and start acquiring false symbols of our creativity, importance, and specialness. I'm always fascinated by commercials for cars, which are essentially big machines that guzzle fossil fuels as we drive them from point A to point B. In the ads, they're magical vehicles that transport us to another world, where attractive people fall all over us. Trees sway in the breeze as we pass them by, even though in reality the vehicle's exhaust is killing them. And the rock and roll songs of our youth pound through our ears, pumping us up with vitality. As one ad once promised, "This is not your father's Oldsmobile." We can make a statement about our personal sense of style with whatever this year's most daring and different automobile is. Yet if we had any true originality, we wouldn't be driving at all. In Holland, 40% of the population rides bicycles to work, but Americans tend to think that bikes are for kids or recreation. We like our vehicles, big, and we thoroughly embrace our car culture despite its cost. Imagining another way to get around seems impossible. Similarly, we've convinced ourselves that we can't create meaning or joy without the hard work and competition that is represented by all the things in our display cases, shelves, closets, attics, basements, and garages. In the US, consumerism has become the new opium of the people, or perhaps the new and improved opium. To get us past our cynicism, advertisers and the media have cleverly repackaged consumerism. We don't just buy stuff, we buy limited edition stuff. Yet if there are limited edition dolls on the shelves of dollar stores, how rare and collectible could our treasure possessions possibly be? And we don't just buy items to give ourselves status or to try to keep us up with the Joneses. No, now we buy that which shows us impeccable taste and ability to stay on the cutting edge. We pride ourselves on knowing that the hottest new website or gadget, what it is. We don't fall for the old television commercials and print ads. We like our ads smaller, tailored to our specific demographic and appearing on our personally designed homepage. We enjoy advertising and being in the know about what we can buy. Recently, a Nielsen Company study of TV recorders, such as TIVO, found that, contrary to advertisers' fears, people are watching almost half of commercials during playback, rather than fast-forwarding past them. We like to believe that this is not our father's consumerism, but it is. And it's just as hollow and unfulfilling now as it was then. When we become paralyzed in a nightmare, we don't have any notion about how we can enjoy a sense of purpose without meeting with everyone's approval. Mothers feel that they have to be perfect. Fathers feel that they have to be everything their own fathers weren't. And young people feel that they have to be on track in every area of their lives by the time they're in 10th high school reunion rolls around. We think that with the right reputation, we'll always have the security of being surrounded by people who care about us and shower us with admiration. Looking outside ourselves to feel validated doesn't work very well. Even our staunchest admirers and supporters may not always be there, may be secretly jealous of us and quietly engaging in sabotage or betrayal, or may turn against us when we finally find the courage to live in a more creative life. The more healthy and balanced we become, the more we'll attract people who mirror our health and balance, and the more our false friends will start to go away. But as long as we go along with the nightmare, our so-called supporters will expect us to stick to the status quo and avoid dreaming of a different life. It's time to wake up from the nightmare we've been participating in, let go of the need to succeed in the mediocre mold, and create a more creative dream. Self-fulfilling prophecies. We perpetuate our personal and cultural nightmares when we don't recognize our role in co-creating reality. Our subconscious beliefs, which are often rooted in fear instead of courage, create self-fulfilling prophecies. Yet we don't understand the power of our expectations for good or bad. In the 1960s, two social researchers named Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson did an experiment in a public elementary school in San Francisco. The administration agreed to allow the children to take a particular intelligence test. Afterward, the researchers informed the teachers that the test had not only measured intelligence, but also predicted that which students would make great gains in intellectual ability. In reality, the test did no such thing. The researchers had randomly chosen a few students' names and declared to the teachers that these were the boys and girls who would benefit enormously from their giftedness. A year later, all the children took a second IQ test, and those who supposedly had tremendous potential for achievement did far better than their peers did. In fact, the teachers claimed that these students were better readers, better behaved, more engaged by school, more intellectually curious, and even more sociable with the others. The teachers had made their unconscious assumptions about these particular boys and girls a reality, and their expectations became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like these students, most of us get locked into a particular fate by the expectations of our parents and culture have of us, whether they're positive or negative. After a short time, we internalize these beliefs and become a version of what we're expected to be, no matter if it's true to who we really are and what we really want. Some of us will rebel against society, but even so, we remain caught in the loop because rather than being creative, we're simply doing the opposite of what we've been told to do. Continually engaging in knee-jerk rebellions is just another type of nightmare. Much as we may chafe at conforming to the expectations of our culture, our parents, our social class, and our neighbors, we think it will be difficult to find the courage to truly defy them. After a while, usually when we're in our 20s, most of us give up and convince ourselves that everyone must be right. We don't have what it takes to accomplish our secret goals after all, and it's time to let go of our childish fantasies. We buckle down and get serious about finding the right spouse and establishing all the symbols of the new American dream. Soon we start to feel depressed and trapped, but we keep living the same way and hoping that things will change. I once heard that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. If so, we're all insane. To envision with our eyes and hearts open to co-create a new reality by courageously dreaming, we have to shed the expectations of our cultural nightmare. Otherwise, we'll manifest the same old wounds again and again, drawing us to situations and people who challenge us to heal our karma at last. Once we begin to wake up from the nightmare, we can weave a creative dream. Dreams that aren't distorted by the failures we experienced in the past, and will no longer feel that we have to rearrange the people and situations in our lives in the hopes of fixing ourselves. Only when we realize that there's nothing in our lives that requires fixing will we be free to change. Co-creating a new reality. The secret to dreaming is that we can't solely focus on a new job, or a new car, or a new partner. When we try to do so, the dream backfires and we wake up to that realization 5 years, or 2 years, or 2 children later. We cannot dream just a small picture. Rather, we have to come up with an entirely new world, and then all the details will take care of themselves. None of us can micromanage creation. We can only get great forces into motion. Whenever the details of our vision aren't working out, it's a sign that we're not dreaming big enough. I'll read that again. Whenever the details of our vision aren't working out, it is a sign that we're not dreaming big enough. When you dream a new world, you co-create. Your co-creator is the universe, the creative force that causes trees to grow from seedlings and galaxies to grow from stardust. It's the force that took you from the sperm and unfertilized egg to human baby and designed your DNA, as well as the mysterious trigger that tells each cell what its job is, whether it's supposed to specialize in transporting oxygen as a red blood cell or produce hormones as a gland cell. You tap into the intelligence of the universe, and it conspires on your behalf to organize the natural world to mirror back your dream. There is no question that we humans have created the chaos and beauty of the world we live in. It's our dream manifested, from manicured parks to overpopulation to industrial pollution, from crowded streets in China to the melting ice caps to the polar bear in the Central Park Zoo. Everything we perceive is the creation of humanity, working in conjunction with, and often at odds with, the universe. We've been true to our mandate in the Bible to take oath of the plants and the animals as we see fit, and the natural world has responded to our choices. Our footprint is everywhere. We've fashioned the modern world with all of its beauty and terror. We've also shaped and molded the natural world with its whales and butterflies to fit our needs. But we didn't actually create it. Or did we? Some physicists have postulated the anthropic principle to explain the strange and extremely unlikely coincidences that had to occur for there to be intelligent life. It's as if the universe had conspired to create this perfect and highly improbable balance of forces that would lead to life. Creationists explain this unlikelihood by saying that a god choreographed the whole dance of existence, while evolutionists say that we should assume the sun, the earth, and the life that evolved on our planet are all the result of random events. As humans, we tend to perceive things dualistically, as if one camp is right and the other is wrong. But dualism is simply the result of our desire to force reality into a neat little package. Perhaps both sides only see part of the story. Maybe what happened is that back when it was all a void, as part of the force of creation, our consciousness participated in the glorious work of art known as the universe. Consciousness expressed itself in the physical world as the Milky Way, the asteroid belts, and the perfect mix of elements that lead to the creation of human beings with the ability to ponder how we got here. It could be that we're part of the creator and the creation simultaneously, and we participate in a dance of evolution that's brilliantly logical and whimsical at the same time. While the question of if we invented ourselves is an interesting one, most of us are concerned more with whether we can dream the world differently at a personal level. Can we craft the family's lifestyles, meanings, purpose we wish for? Or are we at the mercy of forces much larger than ourselves that sculpt and shape our fate? Are we another cog in the wheel of a machine, or do we belong to ourselves and have a personal destiny we can fashion and hone? It may seem that all the evidence is stacked against individuals having any say about the course of our own destiny, that we're falling for an illusion that provides us a false sense of being in the captain's seat when we're really in a rudderless ship. We can gracefully accept that fate bestows on us, or we can shift our perception. Could we have dreamed the universe into being, yet not be able to make an iota of difference in our own lives? We can steer the ship of our life and even summon the wind and change its direction. But to do so requires quiet acts of courage. It requires letting go of the need to move the winds for our own purposes and instead choose to move them for the greater good of all. It requires that we accept responsibility for what we change instead of ducking the consequences. And most of all, it requires that we be careful what we wish for, because what we dream, we will create. Reality and perception. We go about our lives trusting that there are things that everyone can agree upon. A piece of wood is a piece of wood, and humans all over the world understand this. We also recognize its properties. It has weight, yet can float. It can be burned when it's dry, and so on. According to Newtonian physics, a branch of science that explains natural phenomena, we can predict how quickly the piece of wood will fall if dropped from a height. There's no great mystery in that log that we can see, touch, smell, taste, and even hear as it falls to the ground. We understand and agree upon the fact that wood is a solid object with certain characteristics. At the level of awareness that most of us operate in, wood is very real and very hard, and we don't want a big piece of it dropping on top of us. In contrast, in quantum mechanics, the branch of science that explains how our world works at the subatomic level, the old ideas about reality fly out the window. That same piece of wood, for instance, does not have fixed characteristics. The tiniest unit of matter, smaller than an atom, is a particle. Thus, the wood is mostly made up of air that is filled with a buzzing cloud of continually vibrating particles. A particle is a tricky little piece of stuff. If we observe its location at any given moment, we have no way of measuring its speed. If we measure the particle's velocity, it becomes impossible to determine where it is. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the very nature of the particle often changes when it's observed. It may take on the characteristics of a wave, the smallest unit of energy, and then turn back into a particle, the smallest unit of matter. Given this very different reality at the subatomic level, is it correct to say that we human beings are solid creatures made up of air and a bunch of buzzing particles? Or are we energy beings made up of a lot of waves of energy? Could we be both continually flipping from one state to the other? Is a piece of wood a solid object, or is that just how we happen to perceive it? What would happen if we perceived it as a collection of waves, as a collection of energy? I'm not suggesting that by changing our perception, a piece of wood will magically change its nature in the physical world, even though some of the shamans I've met claim that this is the case. If it falls on top of us, we'll feel pain. That's a fact at the physical level. But at a different level of reality, something else is going on when a piece of wood hits us. We get to explain the experience using thoughts, feelings, and metaphors. We determine the piece of wood's significance in our lives by writing a story. We might think that it's a dead branch loosened from the tree by a strong wind, falling down on top of us. We might feel that it's a damned hard piece of wood causing us pain and making us upset. We might perceive that it's a wake-up call because it takes us out of our thoughts and back to the physical world where we need to be at the moment, so we get ourselves out of the windstorm and back into shelter before an even bigger branch hits us. The piece of wood may be a reminder of the fact that we're not paying attention in life. Any or all of these stories could be true. We have the power to determine which one we want to create to explain being conked on the head by a falling branch. Most of the time, the facts we're dealing with feel just as solid as a piece of wood. The facts might be that we have small children dependent on us and a salary that's not enough to cover our monthly bills. The facts might be that we experience low and high sugar levels in our blood and have a disease that doctors call diabetes. And if we don't pay attention to our meals, exercise, and insulin levels, we may cause long-term damage to our body. These facts don't disappear in the material world any more than the piece of wood does. However, our facts are not our stories. They're just the building blocks, the words we piece together to write our tale of being a victim of poverty and poor health, or of being a survivor who overcomes obstacles, manages difficulties, maintains an optimistic attitude, and gives our children an abundance of love. Our situation might be a difficult one, but it's only a nightmare if we choose to make that our reality. By taking the facts and writing a new story with them, we can script a different experience of reality. Thanks for joining me.